Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for joining me for another Sunday Afternoons with Reverend Lucretia. I'm so glad you're here. And if this is your first time finding this station, welcome. I hope that you find it inspirational and uplifting. So, the name of today's talk is I Always Have God to Come Home to. We'll be talking about the fact that God is our home no matter where we live. And the song is Everything by Lauren Daigle. If you'd like to listen to the song before you hear the talk, just go ahead and click on the link. It will be down below in the description. So we'll be talking quite a bit about the life of Peace Pilgrim. We'll be talking about the fact that God is my safe place, that we are constantly held in the arms of God. We will talk about the secret place and finding comfort in God. We'll be talking about scriptural references, as well as the fact that wherever God is our home. Faith in God allows us to have stability in the middle of instability. God is our place of rest. So we're going to start out by talking about Peace Pilgrim. Peace Pilgrim was this unbelievably dynamic, uplifting, inspiring woman who literally did not have a home. So for 28 and a half years, she was homeless. She walked across the country. So she started doing this as what she called her retirement project. She made a vow to be a wanderer, a pilgrim, until mankind learns the way of peace. She would walk on faith. She didn't carry any money. If anybody offered her any money, she didn't take it. She said she would walk until she was given shelter and fast until she was given food. She did this for a total of 28 and a half years. Over the first 20, she covered 25,000 miles. So this started in 1953. It was the MacArthur era. The war was on in Korea, and she considered it her calling to go forth into society, to wake people up from their apathy, to get them thinking. She renounced her personal identity in order to do that. She didn't want it to be about her at all. She wanted it to be about her mission. So nuclear warheads were pointed at U.S. and at that time the USSR, and she said all who are living today will help make the choice, for the tide of world affairs now drifts in the direction of war and destruction. So she was trying to get everybody to consciously come together to work towards peace. She had an outfit that consisted of a blue pair of pants, a blue shirt, blue sneakers, and over that she wore a tunic. The first tunic said walking coast to coast for disarmament, and the second one said 25,000 miles on foot for peace. So she eventually became so popular that she had to schedule herself 2 or 3 years in advance. There were only 2 or 3 people who knew who she actually was. It turns out they later found out that it was her sister who was forwarding her mail to her. So she would make a plan of what towns she would be going through, and she would get her mail forwarded to the post office where she was going to be. But there were only 2 people that knew who she was. The only time she ever took off was during Christmas, and she did that because there was so much correspondence for her to do that she had to stop and answer all those letters. So essentially she talked about living the golden rule. She said that we are here to overcome evil with good, falsehood with truth, and hatred with love. She spoke on radio shows, TV talk shows, in churches and universities and public groups of all kinds. She was ironically killed in a car accident. It was ironic because she walked. She never even owned a car, but she was being driven to a speaking engagement, and her car was hit head on, and she was killed at that time. So this all started in 1938 when she was walking all night through the woods, and she was seeking a more meaningful way of life, and she came to a clearing and there was moonlight, and she said to God, if you can use me, please use me. This took a 15-year period where she prepared herself to do this walk. She said it was when she was spiritually growing up. At that time she worked with seniors and people who had problems, and she did start writing a newsletter on simple living. The people who wrote about her afterwards said that her most precious gift of all was the admonition to look within. She said, your own inner teacher is within. You have all the answers inside yourself. Don't look to me, look to your own inner teacher. So she undertook the pilgrimage not to a place, but for a purpose, which was peace. She walked on faith, and she found that all of her basic needs were met. She plugged into universal supply. She said she never went more than 3 days without food or a place to sleep. The pilgrimage was dedicated to the whole peace picture, peace between individuals, peace between groups, peace between nations, peace with the environment, and of course, very importantly, inner peace. She said there is a power greater than ourselves, which manifests itself within us as well as everywhere in the universe. This I call God. God is the essence of all. So you are within God, and God is within you. You could not be where God is not. To know God is to feel peace within, a calmness, a serenity, an unshakableness which enables you to face any situation. There are two things that remove fear from your life. One is real love toward your fellow human beings. You cannot fear that which you really love. The other is a constant awareness of the presence of God. You will find God only if you will seek, by obeying divine laws, by loving people, by relinquishing self-will, attachments, negative thoughts, and feelings. When you find God, it will be in the stillness. You will find God within. And of course, that's what we teach in the New Thought movement. So I'm going to go over to Bishop R.C. Blakes. He's actually an evangelical preacher, but he has a lot to teach us, and he had a talk that was done during the beginning years of the pandemic, which was called God is My Safe Place. And he reminds us that God is always mindful of us. We have to walk by faith and not by sight. He is our safe place even when we can't understand what is happening around us. He reminds us that 1 Corinthians 10:12 says God always is behind the scenes managing matters. He always has created a way to come out when you're going through a challenge. He always provides a way of escape. You can't recognize the way out of the problem if you are afraid and panicked and frantic and anxious. Through faith, we understand we are being taken care of. Faith that seems to transcend common sense. Understanding does not come by way of information, he says, it comes by way of revelation. When we get quiet and listen to that still small voice. When we stay in faith, no matter what the circumstances are, no matter what's going on around us, when we stay in faith, the eyes of our understanding are enlightened, and we are now on God's frequency. God is our security, our safe place, our refuge. In the 91st Psalm, it talks about this quite a bit. It says, He is my refuge and my fortress. He is my safe place. In God alone will I trust. In order to feel this, we have to develop a God-centered lifestyle. And he said, I want to make sure that you understand I'm not saying religious, but I'm saying God-centered. When we do this, God comes into our being and we are downloading the peace of God. He becomes your strength, but you have to make God your focus. Quit with a half-hearted approach, he says. He reminds us in John 15:7, if you abide in me and my words abide in you, what you ask for you will, and it shall be given unto you. You open up a line of communication with God. Abiding in the love of God is living above troubles and attacks. Abide in my love. Feel the love of God flowing to you and through you, no matter what you're dealing with. Romans 8, I talk about that all the time, says that there's nothing that is ever going to separate us from the love of God, but we can only realize that when our life is centered on God. Psalm 91 again says, Thou art my hiding place, thou shalt preserve me from trouble, take me up and out of all of my calamity, and you become my hiding place. Go to the secret place, and he describes the secret place, that holy place within, as worship. You don't go to a certain address. So remember, he was doing this in the very, very beginning of the pandemic when people couldn't go to church. And he said a lot of people are getting so frantic and anxious because of the fact that they go to church on Sundays. It's an actual physical address, and they're with all these people, and they get all their nourishment and sustenance from going to church, being around people. He said, but that's now how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to know how to turn your kitchen into a sanctuary, your shower, your car. Go into the presence of God, which is the secret place. Dwell in the presence of God. Go into the secret place, which is worship. Hold your head up. God is your refuge, your safe place. God is your fortress. On Christ, the solid rock, I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. Just love that. So let's look at what Scripture has to say. Again, he referred several times to Psalm 91:1. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. Psalm 32:7, you are a hiding place for me. You preserve me from trouble. You surround me with shouts of deliverance. Psalm 27:5, for he will hide me in his shelter in the day of trouble. He will conceal me under the cover of his tent. He will lift me high upon a rock. Deuteronomy 33:27, the eternal God is your refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. Deuteronomy 33:12, of Benjamin he said, the beloved of the Lord shall dwell in safety by him who shelters him all day long. And Psalm 61:4 says, I will abide in your tabernacle forever. I will trust in the shelter of your wings. Joel 3:16, the Lord will also roar from Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem. The heavens and the earth will shake, but the Lord will be a shelter for his people. So God is our home no matter what. There was a Unity minister who gave a talk about finding comfort in God. Her name was Reverend Elizabeth Longo, and she says, the Christ presence is my God, my strength, and my comfort. Comfort may feel like a warm blanket on a cold winter day, or a place to relax and feel safe. Our souls long for reassurance, that know that we are safe and loved and part of something greater. That longing is to know our oneness with God, a God we turn to for strength, solace, and help. Allow our personalities to melt into our divine being. All along, I was being held in the arms of God. So she talks about the fact she got a call from one of her friends who was also a minister. He was a spiritual leader of the community, and he was going through a time of great despair. And he said that he opened up his spiritual toolbox and he called on God. And the words that kept coming were, be still and know that I am God. Our human tendency is to want to alleviate the pain or try to find a solution. What is needed is to make space for spirit to do the healing work. He took comfort from the fact that he had many sacred people in his life who truly loved him and were praying for him constantly. He found comfort in turning his attention to gratitude. You know, we talk all the time that gratitude is the quickest way that you can change your mental state. He knew already that he had all that he needed. He knew already that this too shall pass. I am still here, and the power that carries me through the dark times is still here. It always has been, and it always will be. There is no place where the love of God is not. All things work out for good. Regardless of where we are held in the love of God. By being available to each other, we express the living Christ presence. The greatest source of comfort lies within us, where we can turn for solace, strength, renewal, and guidance. Knowing the Christ in me is knowing unconditional love and acceptance, always guiding me and leading me towards my highest good. We talk about all that time. So metaphysically, house means the house that God builds and dwells in is man's body. A firm truth foundation in consciousness, an established consciousness of protection and safety. Home is an article that was written by Elizabeth Howard, who is also a Unity minister, and she says home is not a destination. Home is not a place to return to or come from. The comfort of home is within. Home is the truth of the divine self that never leaves us. Home can never be found. It's not out there somewhere waiting for us with open arms. Home is ultimately within. The further we travel on the road within and demonstrate our purpose through action, the greater the comfort of home becomes. So here's what I know. Most of you know that I'm in the process of transition right now. So I've started working in another city and I'm moving to another city. And so I've been looking for about 6 months online, but now also physically for a new home to live in. And it's been incredibly frustrating. Most of the pictures that you see online when you go look at homes, when you go to actually see them, they are not what you see in the picture at all. The words also don't match at all, so there's complete descriptions on all of these realtor sites about the home that you're going to be able to buy, and then when you get there, it's just not what it says it is at all. And I must say that I got very frustrated. I was frustrated because I was feeling some pressure. I'm living in an apartment right now, and it has a lease, and I want to be sure that I'm out before the lease has to be renewed. So I'm feeling some time pressure, but I'm also feeling pressure financially because it's so expensive where I live. So the faster that I can get out of here, the more I'll be able to have some funds to keep on going. And so the more I was looking at houses and not finding what I needed, the more I was becoming anxious and stressed out. I was feeling frustrated and anxious, and I allowed fear to take over. I heard myself say to one of my best friends, what if I don't find the right and perfect place? I can't renew my lease and stay where I am. At that point, I knew that I needed to go within. And so I did lots of quiet time, and I realized a few things. My fear was not allowing me to think straight. My fear was making me feel small, not strong enough, or not smart enough to jump through all of the hoops that I would have to jump through in order to buy this home. My perception of myself and my abilities became totally out of alignment with the truth. And we've studied that, not only metaphysically, but if you study medically the brain, it has been proven that when we are in a place where we are stressed out and anxious, we literally cannot think clearly. And so what was happening was the more I was becoming afraid, the more I was unable to come up with any new answers because I was just spinning in this hole of being afraid. I felt like I fell into a dark hole where fear was swallowing me up. I became like a frightened little child who had lost all sense of who I really am. God saved me again, as he always does, for the umpteenth millionth time. He reminded me who I really am. I am a strong, resilient, smart child of God. He reminded me of all of the tough times that I've gone through. How I sold 3 houses, I closed an extremely complicated estate and paid all the taxes. I moved across country. I went back to school. I got a degree. I went to seminary. I got ordained, all within a few years of losing my mom. He reminded me I had no clue what I was doing. But one day at a time, he sent people who knew how to do it. I didn't need to know. I needed to find people to trust who knew. So the passing of my mom came very, very quickly. We put her in the hospital on a Friday, and by the next Saturday morning, a week from then, she had passed. And so all of a sudden I had all of this responsibility to handle all of her affairs. And I was overwhelmed and scared and felt like a little child again. And I prayed about it, and I had a friend who was an attorney. And so I got the truth came to me that I didn't have to understand it. I just needed to have someone who did. And so I went to this friend and I said, will you help me? And he said, of course. And so little by little, I started turning stuff over. To this day, I signed hundreds of pages. To this day, I couldn't explain to you everything that I did, but I trusted him, and I knew God put him in my path to help me. And so one of the biggest lessons was I don't have to know the answers. I don't have to understand all of it. I just have to have people in my life who did. So one by one, I got realtors and involved in all of the different places that I had to sell. And one by one, everything came into alignment. It took years to close the estate. It was very complicated. But the big lesson is I don't have to know. I only have to rely on the strength and the knowledge of someone else. I knew that I didn't need to understand any of the details. God would provide people who would help me. God provides people who are his arms and legs on the ground. God always provides. So I started to breathe again. I pulled myself out of the hole I had fallen into. I became capable of thinking again, all by God's grace. And then I remembered not only that God has always provided people who would help me, but I remembered who I am. I am a child of God who is capable and smart and strong and resilient. I am a reflection of God. I have all of the qualities I need to be able to move forward and make decisions. Fear and anxiety are scary monsters who have no power over me when I stay securely held in the arms of God. God loves me in a way that is totally incomprehensible, and he wants always only my best and highest good. And I remembered I have a home. I have always had a home. As I looked back over all of my life, I realized I have always been given the right and perfect home. There were patches where I was out of alignment with truth, and I lived in some pretty awful places, but they were temporary. And I always ended up getting a home afterwards. More importantly, I became so incredibly clear that home can be a physical place that is comfortable and beautiful and safe, but the most important home I will ever have is in the arms of God. And nothing can ever separate me from that home. God is my home. Just like we live in our physical bodies and they are temporary, our physical home we live in is temporary also. The home that is ours forever and always is God. Close your eyes. And ask yourself when your happiest moments were. Sometimes they were in someone else's home, or a public place, like when I performed the wedding of my nephew. Or sometimes they was in a vacation spot, like when I was kayaking in the Adirondacks. Or when I am sitting next to the ocean and I am staying in a tiny little hotel room. The physical surroundings where we find ourselves do matter, but our home is where we are at peace, where we feel exhilarating joy, when we celebrate life's happiest achievements. Home is where your heart is. Home is where God is. I am forever and always eternally grateful that I always have God to come home to. And so it is. Remember, at all times, the power is in you. It always has been, and it always will be. I'd love to hear your comments on this topic about home, and that God is inside us, and that's where our home always is, and how you manage to feel God's presence as the supporting, loving arms that are always holding us up. I thank you so much for joining me today, and I send you on your way in many blessings.